Nice. Okay, so I just want to officially welcome everybody today. So my name is Mel Groover, and or Melissa for long, and I'm the chapter organizing director of the Younger Women's Task Force of Greater Lafayette. And YWTF, we are a part of the Working Hoosiers Vote Coalition, which is one of our favorite coalitions that we're a part of. It could be the only one that we really actually enjoy every minute of it, you know? So we're really proud to continue working on the Working Hoosiers Vote Coalition. And you'll learn a little bit more about our coalition as we go along in our campaign that we're kicking off today of 100 days of action leading into the 2020 general election, which it feels like we just voted for our primary yesterday, because it basically was like last week or something. So time is moving really fast and really slow in these days, but I'm gonna just introduce a couple of the other folks that you're gonna be hearing from, and maybe not hearing from some of them on the call, and the organizations that they represent. I'll let them wave when I say their names. So serving with YWTF as well is Vanessa Pacheco, who's our Director of Policy. And then with Indivisible is Matt Geyer. You've already heard Matt's voice once. And also with Greater Lafayette Indivisible is Chris, who you're going to hear from a lot today, which we're very excited about. And then with Greater Lafayette Immigrant Allies is Margaret Haas and Monica Casanova. Yeah, there you are, Monica. And then with Surge Showing Up for Racial Justice is Ian Andrews, who just popped on Vanessa's screen. And I hear they just moved into a new house recently. So Ian Andrews representing Showing Up for Racial Justice. So yeah, so what we want to do is, typically what we would do is we would say, hey, turn to your neighbor, introduce yourself to your neighbor. So we're going to do that, because I love breakout rooms. So what we're about to do is you're about to magically appear on the screen with one other person, and we're gonna give you 2 minutes, and you're gonna introduce yourself to your neighbor. That'll be your neighbor. And you'll introduce yourself to your neighbor, how you found yourself here on this call today. And maybe if you get a chance to, what was the first thing you ever voted for? You know, like maybe it wasn't a particular election. I remember pushing the button with my mom one time when she like smuggled me into the voting booth as a child. But it also could be like you voted for the pizza, you know, like pizza versus cookies, which, just so you know, the Working Hoosiers Vote Coalition is a landslide pizza. We voted for the pizza. There was no dissent when we voted for pizza or cookies yesterday on our prep call. So, so you're gonna share with your partner your name, how you found yourself here on this call. And if you get it, I'm gonna give you 2 minutes, so it's a minute each. If you have time, share with them what's the first thing you voted for. So Matt's gonna make the magic happen. Breakout style. Oh my gosh, I love breakout rooms so much, y'all. I can't tell you, because when we do breakouts in real life, I could never get you guys to come back so quickly. I would be like, come back. Hi. Okay, cool. Thanks. Tell us something. Throw in the chat. What was the first thing your partner voted for? Or tell us why your partner is here. Just like get that chat moving. Show us that you can use the chat. Chris in the chat, y'all. Ooh, American Idol. Yes. Canada voting. I love it. Glia bringing in folks. Prom and homecoming. Yes, these are good. Thank you for helping me remember. Sometimes I voted for some things other than the pizza. Kindergarten, class superlatives. Did anybody win a class superlative like in high school? Is anybody like best hair or most likely to succeed? I always want to revisit those folks. Like, where are they now? You know, like, have they succeeded? And at what? Like, succeeding at what, you know? Okay, cool. I'm loving this. Okay, cool. All right, so I'm kind of serving as our timekeeper today, and I'm also gonna be vulnerable and mention that I've already went over time, right? And so I'm gonna pivot to Vanessa, who's gonna, and before I do that, I just wanna thank all of you for being on this call because we've got some big goals to register voters, and in particular, we want to register folks that a lot of times are left out of, sometimes intentionally, many times intentionally out of the political process. And we're really working hard to make sure that we can set some really lofty goals and accomplish them, right? And we need you in order to do that. So we're excited that you're on board to not just learn how to register voters, but how do we register voters from an anti-racist perspective? How do we register voters and help people to feel like the issues that matter to them are worth being engaged in the local community, and holding those that we that are running for office and those that are elected to office accountable towards working for the people, right? And so Vanessa Pacheco is going to talk a little bit about that anti-racist voter engagement perspective and how that ties in to the work that she's doing as part of the collective and some of the other things with the collective that are going on. Because maybe you're wondering, like, how does this fit into this current moment? And so Vanessa's going to give us that context before we get into some of the nitty gritty of the how. Vanessa?
Hi. Really quickly, Matt, are we doing slides? It's okay if not, I just want to know.
We can. Screen sharing is enabled, so if people have slides or Chris has slides, they should be able to
Yeah,
share them.
Chris, let's make it happen, man. I love it. Can I get a thumbs up from Mel that she can see this? Okay, awesome. So that means that everyone can see it and we're gonna get where we need to be.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to being in present view.
Yeah.
So it can be bigger for people on their phones.
Yeah.
Someone's mouse is giving them a hard time.
Yeah, it seems so. So I'll before the slides are pulled up, I'll just go ahead and kind of give you the background of who I am, what is the collective, and how are we sort of invested in this work really intimately. So for those of you who don't know who I am, aside from being the policy director for the Younger Women's Task Force, I'm a part of a caucus that is right within the Younger Women's Task Force called the Collective. And the Collective essentially, what we do is we are a group of non-binary folks and women, a part of Younger Women's Task Force, who are also folks of color. And so we want to make sure, and YWTF does at large, that our needs are met within an internal activist space, but we also want to sort of begin to set the agenda together or collectively, see how that works, or collectively set the agenda for like what our racial politic is going to be in this town, in this county. And so you might know a couple of the other folks from the collective, and you might be familiar with some of the work that we've been doing, including today. We had a great conversation, starting conversation with the mayor around policing, but that's only one of the concerns that we have as a small caucus of individuals. And I won't go too in depth about every single one of those things, but one of the concerns that has been raised up in recent weeks in our commitment to be really entrenched in our community is that voting is something that's to specifically collective members and members of our community who are Black. Can I get another thumbs up from Mel if she can see this? Awesome. Okay. So Chris, if you just want to slide us into the collective slide.
Just so you know, Vanessa and Matt's the one sharing the slides. So Matt, if you can advance the slides a few slides, because I covered a lot of stuff that was on the first ones.
I love it. Yeah, that's us.
This is you, Vanessa. You want the collective slide?
Yes, I do.
That would be next. After movement.
Okay, cool. Awesome. Okay, so so one of the central issues that folks identified was really wanting to commit to getting folks better access to their voting rights. And so a lot of folks are really passionate about us making sure that we hit every part of our community, particularly the most marginalized portions of our community. You know, I've heard from a lot of folks in this town that they don't think that there's like a distinct set of neighborhoods where Black people live, for example, and that's just not the case. There are places that are not being touched by initiatives to get folks to vote, and that's why Working Hoosiers Vote exists. And so that's why the collective wanted to work specifically with Working Hoosiers Vote, who already does amazing efforts in intentionally reaching out to marginalized communities. It's something that we've been committed to in consistent struggle, alongside of each other. Like, we've always been trying to think about how can we do that, and how can we do that responsibly, right? And I think that led us to, if you want to go one slide back, actually, Matt, to a framework that we sort of like picked up from the Movement for Black Lives and also the 8 to Abolition movement. We're really interested in thinking about several things. And one of those things is electoral engagement. We want to really be thinking about how, whether folks realize it or not, a lot of the decisions that they make in community, if they have power, are based upon white supremacy. And we can talk about all of those things at another time. But I think one of the greatest ways to challenge that is to put folks in place that are that we can actually move or influence. And once we get folks in place that we can influence, we want to put pressure on them to do right by the most marginalized, the most vulnerable people in our communities. So if what we recognize is that Black folks in this community are getting disproportionately locked up, they're afraid of the cops, we want to be able to be in conversation with elected officials that will believe us. And part of that is making sure that those most vulnerable people have access to the vote. And there could be so many reasons that Chris is going to talk about today that they might not have that access, and we're here to be at the forefront of that and do it in a way that that actually invests in people rather than demanding things from them, demanding that Black people once again save us as a nation from white supremacist leadership. Cool. If we go to the next slide, back to the collective slide, the last thing that I want to say about that is that we have some specific demands that are really actually for our general entire community. And one of those things is that we want to make sure that the rights of protesters are respected and protected. And these all are generated from conversations we've had with Black folks across this community. We want to demilitarize our communities. We want to make sure that when we address harm that's been done in this community, we do it without chemical weapons, for example. We want to deeply invest in community care, and we don't want our existence to be criminalized. There are so many things that Black folks do as a culture, and that homeless folks do as a culture, poor folks do as a culture in order to survive, that are just like basically sort of like ordinanced into being illegal. And so we want to live in a world where we have elected officials that we can hold accountable to these 4 demands. And the reason why we show you those is because these are the things that are on Black folks' minds in this community. And I bet that it's also on the minds of other marginalized people in this town. Because as per usual, when Black folks come together in this country and organize around issues, they're typically the most intersectional. And we're thinking about what it means to address not just the needs of Black folks, but Black trans folks, Black queer folks, Black folks with disabilities, right? And the list goes on. And so those are all, we try to make sure that those 4 core points were things that we heard from everyone and that touched every corner of this community. Because when we get what we need, then we believe that everyone's getting what they need. So those are some of the big things, and we want you to know, like, what are the things that people are really considering when they decide that they're going to vote, right? And those are 4 huge pieces. The last thing I'll point to is that we've got a couple events coming up. You can check those out on the Join Us, and we're going to get to that at the end of the call. But I just wanted to pay attention to the fact that it was on the slide. So yeah, can you go to the next slide? I just want to make sure I covered everything, Matt. Awesome. That was everything for me. And if folks have questions, you can ask me those in the chat. Check.
I think now we're going to Chris. You're going to have to unmute yourself for us to hear you, Chris.
I've never quite gotten that. You know, I've always been bad at unmuting myself. Thank you so much. And Mel, thank you for the introduction, and thank you, Vanessa, for your work, and thanks to everybody in the collective for their continued agitation and leadership. We're going to be talking today a lot about systemics, and we're going to be talking a lot about the electoral system. So before we do that, I think it's important that we develop some context for understanding the racial reality of the electoral system. Could you go to the next slide, Matt? This is just a very, very basic overview of the racialized history of how we do electoral politics in the United States. From 1619 to 1869, Black folks lived under slavery, right, and were completely disenfranchised. When the U.S. was founded in 1789, that gave some white men the right to vote. The 15th Amendment, which was passed in 1869, technically barred states from disenfranchising people based on their race or color, but that was never really enforced, unfortunately. In the post-Reconstruction period and into the 1900s, targeted massive disenfranchisement, constant violence, and laws criminalizing Blackness and criminalizing other marginalized statuses proliferated. The growth of the racialized carceral system and the felony disenfranchisement put in place in the 1900s really made the situation much worse. And despite that, there were some attempts to make progress during the 19-teens and 1920s. The 20th Amendment granted women the right to vote, but that was not extended to everybody. During the mid-1900s, mass agitation for civil rights and lagging judicial and congressional attempts to reform the electoral system to enforce the 15th Amendment. The biggest piece of legislation that's important in the modern era would be the Voting Rights Act. This made it so that areas that had a history of discriminating against folks based on their race or ethnicity had to have pre-clearance before they changed their voting rules. Unfortunately, since really the 60s, but much later, but going on into the future, judicial dismantling of the VRA, like in Shelby versus Holder, and state attempts have been made to reimpose or strengthen already existing white supremacist voter policies. There are a couple of examples that are very recent that illustrate how voter suppression targets Black folks in particular. Georgia is a very good example. The 2020 primary election, which recently happened, took place amid the COVID-19 crisis and amid massive disparities in terms of vote access. So districts in majority Black neighborhoods, primarily in Atlanta, but in other Black counties as well, had much less access to vote centers than and precinct locations than folks in white counties or in the suburbs of Atlanta. This is not a new thing. This is actually very common. In most areas that have majority minority populations, you can expect to see fewer voting sites. Similar things happened in Wisconsin in 2020. Massive disparities in vote access in Milwaukee. And again, this has happened several times. So we know that this is kind of a systemic thing that happens no matter what. Carol Anderson made a really good example of voter ID in her book, One Person, No Vote. The imposition of voter ID was particularly hard on Black communities in Alabama because these communities were also communities that had their driver's license branches, their bureaus of motor vehicles removed from their counties. So folks were put in situations where they had to have voter ID in order to vote, but they didn't drive, so they didn't have a car, so they didn't need a driver's license to get about their day. So in order to get one to vote, they would have to go to a BMV that might be 1 or 2 counties over without a car. So these are situations that the states tend to put Black folks, Indigenous folks, and other people of color and other marginalized folks in order to systemically deny them their right to vote. Again, this isn't a new tactic or a new strategy. This is a strategy that's been in place ever since those folks got the right to vote. it's important to name that there are a lot of there's been a lot of great work and a lot of great agitation to increase the franchise and to extend the franchise to folks who were disenfranchised before. One example that's still ongoing is in Florida, where felony disenfranchisement was the law until a constitutional amendment was passed by a referendum that gave formerly incarcerated folks the right to vote. However, the implementation of this amendment has been stopped and thwarted to some degree by the governor and by other folks who want to impose poll taxes and other methods to keep folks from voting with an obvious racial bias against Black folks and brown folks. Can we move on to the next slide? All right. So with that context in mind, and with the idea that like this context of having a history of voter suppression, that might mean that people see the electoral system a bit differently. We'll get to that a bit more later, but first, let's start talking about the election. As you might have noticed, today is the beginning of the voter registration period, and that means that folks can now register to vote either online or in person. The voter registration deadline is October 5th. Folks must register to vote by 11:59 p.m. online, or their voter registration forms need to be turned into the Board of Elections by the time the office closes that day. Early voting is anticipated to begin the day after the voter registration period ends. So that would be October 6th if it's like it is in other years. And then election day, the absentee ballot request is due October 22nd, and then election day and absentee ballots are due on November 3rd. These dates are, especially some of the voter registration deadlines and other things, those might be subject to change as if we get more flare-ups of COVID-19. As I'm sure many of you remember from being on a very similar call during the height of the COVID-19 epidemic, we had to change our state's our state's election date, and therefore all of the deadlines attached to that election. So I'm not saying that will happen this time, but that's an eventuality that we need to be prepared for. But until then, these are dates that we really need to commit to memory and keep in the front of our brains. Could you go to the next slide? Thank you. All right, this is a really important slide because this is a question that we're going to hear a lot when we're doing our voter registration work. And that is, who is eligible to vote in Indiana? One important thing to name is that not every state has similar eligibility requirements. So some folks might think that their state or the state that they came from or a state that they lived in a while ago has the same requirements as Indiana. They might be a little bit different. So a person is eligible to vote in Indiana if they meet all of these requirements. They must be 18 years old on or before Election Day. That's November 3rd, 2020. They must be a United States citizen. They can, of course, naturalized citizens, they have full voting rights the moment they are naturalized. The person must have lived in the precinct for 30 days prior to the election, and the person must not currently be in prison after being convicted of a crime. And of course, if you meet all of those four characteristics and you register to vote, then you're registered to vote. That's your 5th requirement, and then you can vote. Matt, can you go to the next slide, please? Thank you. This gets its own slide because it's that important. One thing that we do a lot of at Greater Lafayette Indivisible is voter registration out in street festivals like the Mosey Down Main Streets and other opportunities for us to come in contact with people in the community. And one thing that we hear a lot, and one misconception that we hear a lot, is that formerly incarcerated people can't vote. A lot of people seem to have internalized this misinformation, either because in many states they are still disenfranchised, or just because nobody ever told them. I don't think that there's much intentionality behind telling folks that they can vote once they get out of jail or prison. So here are some other folks who can also vote in Indiana. People who are on parole can register to vote. People who are on probation. People who are in community corrections programs. People who are in home detention. And people who are in jail awaiting trial. This is extremely important information to know because this information is often not known, and there's a reason, there's a racialized reason why formerly incarcerated people can't vote in certain states. If we look into the voting history of Louisiana or the voting history of Georgia or other former Confederate states, you'll find a very long history of linking carcerality and denial of the franchise back to race. So so it's really important that folks know that formerly incarcerated people can vote in Indiana. It's probably one of the most important pieces of voter misinformation that we see every time we go out. This is something that again, I can almost not stress enough how important this is. Matt, can we move on to the next slide, please? All right. With the context of who is eligible to vote, now we can talk about how we're actually registering people to vote. There are two ways that we do that, by the federal form and then by the TurboVote. So let's go ahead and look at the federal form, which is on our next slide. All right. So this is the federal form. It has, we tend to divide it into two sections. I talk about the top half and the bottom half, right? So where it says, please fill out these sections below if they apply to you, that's the bottom half, right? And most of the time, folks aren't going to be using it that much. So can we go to the next slide so we can get a closer look? There we are at the top half. So I just wanted to go through the boxes with you really quickly, because understanding what can be in these boxes and what needs to be in these boxes is really important, so that we can communicate that information to people as we're registering them to vote. All right, so the first two boxes are the check boxes. Those are you a citizen of the United States of America, and will you be 18 years old on or before Election Day? Those both need to have yes checks in them. The next line, the line 1, has your prefix. If you feel comfortable doing that, you do not have to supply a prefix if you do not want to. Then your last name, your first name, and your middle name. Your middle name is not required, nor is a suffix. But you can supply those if they apply to you. Your home address is on line 2. We ask folks to make sure they include their apartment number, because sometimes folks will forget about that. And then address 3, this one isn't used a lot, but if you get your mail in a different place than you're registering to vote, then that information needs to go down there. And that's because the Board of Elections sends you a card to confirm your voter registration. We'll get to that later. Box 4 is your date of birth. Box 5 is a telephone number, which is optional, but helps the Board of Elections get a hold of you if they need to. Box 6 is your ID number. In any state and with the federal form, you can use either your Indiana driver's license or Indiana ID number to in this box, or, and this is what we suggest for folks, is to use the last 4 digits of your social security number. That will allow the Board of Elections to do your voter registration. And people are much more likely to know the last 4 digits of their social security number than their driver's license number. I, for one, have no idea what my driver's license number is, and I don't think I'm ever going to learn. All right, and then after you get done with the ID number, there are 2 boxes that actually don't apply to us at all and that we don't fill out. And a lot of times when you're registering voters with us, we're gonna cross those boxes out anyway. And those are choice of party. In the state of Indiana, we don't do voter registration by party. We declare party by voting in a primary election. So that box doesn't do anything for us. And Indiana doesn't collect race or ethnic group for voter registration, so that doesn't apply to us either. And then after that's all done, box 9 is the signature. It needs to look like a signature, preferably the one that you use a lot. Indiana doesn't have a strict handwriting matching right now, but that's always something that could be in the cards later. So it needs to have a signature, and then the month, day, year, and those need to be today's. So with that knowledge and just this image of the voter registration form in our brains, let's move on to the next slide, which has just some extra information. There we are. So yeah, this is, I always like to tell people, when we're dealing with voters and when we're dealing with registering people, we really have to check everybody's work, right? We can't fill out the forms for them, but we can make sure that everything looks like it should be there, right? So there's the 2 check boxes. There's the gender. Gender, of course, does not have to match what is on the state ID for voter ID purposes. And that's very important for our trans and non-binary friends for whom it is actually more difficult to get this identification. The name on your voter registration card, on your voter registration must conform to the name on the ID card that you are using to vote. So this means that your name has to look similar. Respellings or slight changes due to changing the position of letters or middle names, that shouldn't change anything, but conformity is something that the state wants to see in terms of names. That isn't the greatest thing in the world, but it's what we have. The address, one important note is that we ask folks to register to vote where they live right now. A lot of folks will say, oh, well, I'm a student here, or I'm here temporarily, by meaning like a year or something like that. And the usual response that I'll give is, well, your head is hitting the pillow in this town, and we value your input because what we do in government is going to affect you, right? So we try to get folks registered to vote here. One thing about the date boxes, and this applies to the date of birth and the date box in box 9, it's really important that folks don't get these mixed up, and they get them mixed up a lot. So it's really important that when we see these forms and when people are filling them out and when we're checking them, that we're making sure that people put today's date in today's date box and their date of birth in the date of birth box, because otherwise they're not only too young to register to vote, but because they put their things in the wrong box, but the voter registration deadline would have passed a long time for the election or for the date that they would have put down. All right. Telephone number, again, is for situations where Board of Elections might need more info. And as we mentioned before, the last ID number, we're going to ask people to use the last 4 of their social security number. It's a lot easier for people to do. Let's see. Yep. All right. We go to the next page, because we have an entire other half of the voter registration form to talk about. One interesting thing is that—
Chris, can I stop you for just a second?
Yes.
Someone is asking in the chat, I don't want it to get lost. If someone cannot physically fill out the form themselves, are we able to complete it for them?
Oh, we are going to get there. Yes.
Yep.
Yes.
That's what I thought. I just wanted to assure them of that. Yeah.
Right. This is the bottom half. Yes. And the bottom half broadly is for cases kind of like the one that Mel just described, right? This is for some scenarios that aren't going to apply in a lot of cases, but when they do, we need to be extra careful about them, because these are usually scenarios where if we don't act properly or if we don't follow up correctly, maybe the voter won't be registered. The first situation is the change of name. You're not going to come across this too often, but occasionally you will come across somebody who wants to use this as an opportunity to change the name on their voter registration. And if that's the case, that's just box A. Box B is one that people are technically supposed to use pretty frequently. That's the box that you put your old voter registration in, and it cancels your voter registration. The Board of Elections really does like to see people doing this. Unfortunately, people tend to move around a lot and, forget their voter registration or forget where they're registered. So we ask folks to try to remember the last place they were registered and put that in. But if they don't remember it, it is not the end of the world. That's the Board of Elections job to figure that out, not ours. So we'll let them do their jobs. The next box is box C, and box C is a different box. This box is typically used for a couple of use cases. One is folks who are in very, very rural areas and don't necessarily have street numbers. So this can happen. I'm not sure if we have too many situations like this in Tippecanoe County, but there might be, some folks who it would be a lot easier for them to just describe where their house is or where they live. So if that's the case, they can use this form to plot out where they can be found and where their house is, and people can register them to vote that way. Now, this is also used for people without a fixed address. So people who are chronically experiencing homelessness, or people who may be experiencing homelessness, around the time that they're being registered to vote. And for those people, this is used to give for them to give a location as to where they can be found, right? This is where folks can be found, by other folks generally during the day. So so if you come across folks who are experiencing homelessness and want to register to vote, as is their right to do, right? Then use this box to do that. Typically, if you're filling out box C, it's also a good idea to fill out box D, but we'll get into that in a minute. Box D is for applicants who are physically unable to sign or fill out the form by themselves, right? So if for whatever reason folks aren't able to fill out everything all the way, then you can help them fill it out according to their instructions, and sign in box D. And if you're giving in box D, as it says on the form, give your name, address, and phone number. It says phone number optional. Please give your phone number. It's actually very important that the Board of Elections follows up with people who are using box D in order to get the best information and to help people register to vote who might have a much more difficult, if not impossible time registering to vote otherwise. In general, for box C, in situations where people are experiencing homelessness or something like that, a lot of times it is a decent idea to ask them if they would like help signing that, or if they need other help with that, and then put your name down in box D, because that allows you to establish a continuum of folks who are providing the service of registering them to vote. All right, so these are some situations that aren't going to come up a lot, but when they do come up, it's actually really important to recognize what you need to do. And one thing about using box D and signing is that if you are signing in box D, you need to make yourself available. So that means if you're signing in box D and you give somebody your phone number and email, you're going to get a call in all likelihood from the Board of Elections or an email from them, or both. You need to answer those calls and respond to those emails, because if you don't and they need to follow up with you and confirm that you're who you are, or that you registered this person, if you don't do that, then that person won't be registered. And it's not great that that's the way that it is. I wish that it was a bit easier, but that's the way it is, and we have to work within that system, unfortunately. All right, can we move on to the next slide? Well, thank you. All right, so this is just some of the checks that we were talking about. I feel like this is I covered most of this in there, but if you need to use this slide for reference, we'll have these slides up so that you can take a look at them. Next slide.
Hey, Chris,
right.
Can you hear me?
Yes, absolutely.
There's another question related to what you just said. Does the person in box D have any requirements? Like if I'm doing box D, is there a requirement?
So if you're doing box D, you should expect to have the Board of Elections follow up with you to confirm that you are indeed the person who helped that person register to vote.
Do I have to be
I'm sorry, I'm not sure if I understand the question.
Specifically, do you have to be a citizen?
I do not believe that there is a requirement for you to be a citizen to engage in any type of voter registration activity in this state. All right, and the truth is that in terms of like what the Board of Elections really needs to process a voter registration form, these are the 6 things that must be filled. So the applicant's name, their residence address, their birth date, a voter identification number, so that would mean either the last 4 digits of their social security number, or their driver's license number, or their Indiana ID card or BMV ID card number. And then if the person has no residence address, the box in box C, and number 6 would be the signature, which is you swearing that everything is true. So, so in reality, in situations in which you are looking at somebody filling out a voter registration form and they filled it out really quick and they have to go, these are the things that really need to be there, right? Ideally, we would like to get more information so that we can make sure that Board of Elections is has the best info to aid in their registration. But if we don't have time for that, which might happen, then this is the information that needs to be down there. Do you mind moving on to the next slide?
Chris, I just wanted to give you a time check of 6:55.
Shoot. All right. Okay, so we have some process things to go through. All right, so after we get our voter registration forms done and back from the voters, we put them in the sequester envelope, which we're going to have. We give those forms back to the organizer, and then we are going to keep those forms for a couple of days to minimize potential contact with coronavirus. And then the organizers will deliver these forms to the Board of Elections. So we're kind of centralizing our forms and going and sending this up. Voters should expect a card from the Board of Elections in the mail 3 to 4 weeks after their voter registration is processed. If a card isn't received, those folks need to contact the Tippecanoe County Board of Elections. And of course, we'll have a script for that for when we're out on door, sorry, not on door, in the community doing this voter reg. All right, Matt, I gotta hurry up and get through this. We're going to talk about the TurboVote. I plan to do a bit of an interactive on this, but instead we can just read about TurboVote because it is very easy to use. Can we go to the next slide? All right, so TurboVote, just very quickly, is a nonprofit voter service that provides election date, time, polling location, and absentee ballot information to voters, and then it moves folks to the state online voter systems to register them to vote. So TurboVote kind of wraps around our state voter registration system to give an extra service, and that service is Get Out the Vote tools. So these are TurboVote is a really great tool for helping us guarantee that we can contact people even when we can't. So if for example, we see somebody and make contact one time and we register them with paper, we're not exactly sure if they're getting out to vote. If we register them through TurboVote, we're sure that somebody is following up with them, and that somebody is TurboVote, and they're very insistent about sending texts, and they're very, very good about following up when election dates change or when absentee ballot requirements change. So TurboVote really stays on top of it, and they have the best information. Next slide. All right, so we're not going to take the tour right now because we're a little bit behind, and I really want to respect your time. But if you have time, go to gli.turbovote.org and familiarize yourself with how it works. It really just takes your name. They prefer your name as it appears in your driver's license or state ID because the state voter registration system likes it. Then it'll ask you for your number for text or email. Once you're in, you can hit the button to opt out of the national organization's emails, and then you're all signed up. TurboVote will then send you updates, and they'll confirm, of course, that they are sending you messaging or sending you messages. So TurboVote is just a really great program. It really helps us a lot, and the reason why we use TurboVote over just going to Indiana voters is so that we can tell how many voters we've actually registered throughout our campaign. All right, next slide. Okay, this is the fun stuff. This is the good stuff. This is what we're really here for. This is the voter registration discussion. Can we go to the next slide? We're going to develop some positionality and context in voter registration work really quick. One thing that we need to think about whenever we're interacting with folks is, who are we? Like, who is the person who's registering the voters? Who are you? What is your cultural context? How does our cultural context in relationship to power inform our own relationship to the electoral system? So I can name, for example, for myself, I'm a cisgendered white gay man, right? And that means that, I have the knowledge that the electoral system is very helpful to me as a white person, right? Because I benefit from white supremacy, and I benefit from the systems that the government has set up to benefit me in that way. But I don't necessarily benefit from the heteronormative parts of government, right? So I don't benefit necessarily from the same type of healthcare access that straight people have, or, for a very long time, until today, employment protections by law, right? So that might impact how I see the electoral system. I might look at the electoral system and say, hey, this system hasn't helped me out in these ways. Why should I want to vote for anyone? And it's important to name that the experiences that people have with the electoral system are in a very real way formed by how we're seen by society and how we intersect with power. So it's really important to name that marginalized folks in particular might not have the same pro-democracy, pro-electoral system stance as people who are not marginalized, and that is fine, right? And that it is not an indictment on marginalized folks that marginalized folks don't want to engage with the electoral system. It's not something that folks can really begrudge of folks. An important takeaway from this is that not everybody has the same relationship with the electoral system as you may have, and that some people's lived experience with the government is extremely negative. So when we're registering voters, we have to think about the possibility that even exposing people to talking about the government or the electoral system might be traumatic. We really need to be prepared to to center up and react to folks with empathy, because they might not react well to this. Regardless, organizers on days of events can really help out with positionality and context. And by that I mean we can help people understand, where is this neighborhood? What are we doing today? When we're out at Food Finders, who are we going to see? When we're out registering voters in the parks, who are we going to expect to see, right? And how can we make sure that we are speaking to those people with empathy and respect? And that's really the most important thing. And that really requires a lot of mirror work. So you'll notice I'm asking a lot of questions, and I'm not going to answer them for you. We have to go and answer them for ourselves. Next question, or sorry, next slide. All right, so now we're going to get into some of the mechanical parts of asking. And the most important part of the voter registration discussion is asking. Let's create a bit of a scene. It's late June, and you're registering voters in a park. You go up to a person and you ask, you say, good name, oof. Good afternoon, my name is Chris, and I'm out registering voters this afternoon. Are you interested in registering to vote at your current address? Some important things to note. We put the ask out front. We want to respect people's time, more, at least more than I do. And we want them to know that we're out here to register them to vote. We want to let them know what they're doing. And then at the end, we want to include at your current address so that people know that they need to register to vote here and now. Next question, or next slide. Listen. Okay, this is the most important thing that we're doing because this is actually an opportunity for us to learn about our communities, right? Once you ask folks if they're registered to vote, they'll either say yes or no, or they might just start saying words. So we have to really be prepared for everything. No matter what they have to say, we have to be curious and attentive and willing to hear more. So one way to do that is, signal through your body language that you're listening to people. You can smile and nod and, bob back and forth and stuff like that. That's kind of what I do. And you can also expect to hear some things. So this is the point at which we're going to hear people's perceived barriers to voting. So we're going to hear why they think they can't vote or why they think they can't register to vote. And we're also going to, this is a place where we might hear electoral skepticism. This is a place where we might hear people say, I don't want to deal with the electoral system. I don't want to deal with voting. This is also an opportunity. We are going to hear some things, and we might hear an opportunity to link what we're hearing from the potential voter to our priorities. So in this context, this means our movement for Black Lives work, and this means the work of the collective. But it also means just our organizations and our collective capacity to hear people. So in general, if folks are saying something interesting, listen to it and write it down. We're going to have note-taking forms at Actions so that folks can take down the things that they're hearing during discussions, and we hope that we'll get some good emergent knowledge and emergent action from those, which is really a big part of what we do. Next slide. All right, respond. This one is fairly simple because you have to decide where they're going, right? If they're ready to register and update, you let them know about the options, the physical form or the TurboVote. If they're not ready, attempt to find why and address the barrier. If they're unsure, they need more info, tell them about the local elections. They're listed right on this slide, and you can also tell folks to go to 411.org. Next slide. Thank you. All right, so if the person is, if we're getting to the point where we're registering folks, we have to determine whether they want to do it online or using the form. Using the form can also sign them up for election date and time alerts. So that's something to remember. At the same time, it's also difficult to confirm that people are doing the voter registration via TurboVote while you're with them, right? If you're doing it by a paper form, you get the paper form back and you can say, oh, wow, they did this. I can confirm that. A lot of times, even if you give somebody a QR code and you see them go to the website, we don't really know that they're doing, we don't have a confirmation that they're going to do it until it shows up in our TurboVote numbers later, right? So that's something to keep in mind, is that it's nice to be able to confirm that with a paper form. Here's something that's very important, and this is just kind of boilerplate stuff. Everybody who wants to register to vote can. We're not allowed to discriminate, and we also can't screen folks by party ID, which means let's say we really don't like Republicans, right? And and somebody comes up to us and says,
Let's just say.
All right, let's just say.
Maybe.
Let's just say. Yeah. And let's just say we don't want to register the vote. And somebody says, well, I'm going to, and we ask somebody, oh, are you registered to vote at your current address? And they say, well, I'm not, but I want to register to vote so that I can vote for the Republicans and the what's his name, the Donald Trump, right? And the thing is that we do have to register them to vote, right? We don't really have to affirm them or make them feel good about themselves or anything like that, but we can give them the okay, here's a form, fill it out, have fun, bud. We don't got to be super excited about it. At the same time, if folks feel as though people are treating them in a way that is racist, sexist, homophobic, transphobic, queerphobic, that makes them feel lesser, then that's a situation where you can get out of there. Don't feel like you have to be in that situation or subject yourself to people's violence. Okay. And that's kind of important, because I think sometimes people hear the legal requirement and think maybe, you know, this is something that requires us to put ourselves in dangerous situations. It is not. I do not want to ever put anybody in a dangerous situation doing this. And of course, the most important thing is that whenever we get forms back from folks, we got to double check them. We really got to double check them, because people will make a lot of mistakes on them. Can we go to the next slide, please? All right. And so now we're getting close to the agitation and ending section. So when we're thinking about agitating or like escalating people into further action, right? We're trying to figure out, has someone like said something? Did somebody finding something very interesting? Are they ready to take charge in the community? Are they saying, you know, I'm ready, you know, because I'm annoyed that, you know, there isn't an ordinance banning fireworks or something like that. You know, like those people, we can take their info and be like, oh, well, you know, we can maybe loop you in to do something else, or maybe to strengthen your voice, or organize you around, or put that energy toward something that would be more like liberatory oriented, or something that we'd be doing. All right. And then, of course, we have the post registration info to deliver. Voters will receive a card at their address confirming their registration. It's supposed to arrive generally 3 to 4 weeks after the voter registration is handed in. Your mileage may vary. Sometimes it's a bit later. If a voter needs an Indiana ID to vote but doesn't have one, take down their contact info. That's something that we can get them in touch with folks who can help them, or, you know, we can probably help them ourselves, right? Either way, it's important that folks know that there are services available to help folks who don't have ID and need them, and that we can put them in touch with them. I know that, for example, LUM has an ID clinic, and that the BMV is required to give folks free state IDs for purposes of voting. All right, and then of course, thank people for their time.
And I'm going to thank Chris for his time, because we're going to pivot to Vanessa. Matt, you're going to skip over a few slides, because we're actually, me, Chris, and Vanessa have been chatting, and we are going to cover the common barriers at a later date when we're seeing people like in person, so that gives people an opportunity to synthesize some of this information. So we can go to the commitment card slides. Yeah, the next steps, perfect. Nice. Great, yeah, and I want to reiterate, I think one of the things that's sometimes challenging on these types of calls is not being able to feel the energy in the room. And sometimes it feels like, how many times do we have to talk about a voter registration form? But it doesn't matter how many times we talk about it, we always get some wrong. And those birth date and today's date are the most common barriers. And what I really like about the fact that that's the most common mistakes that people make is it gives me an opportunity to talk to the potential voter while they're registering, because I get to say like, hey, make sure you get your birth date right and your today's date right, because, you know, people flip those and then you just be too young or whatever. It gives me an opportunity to kind of have a laugh with them a little bit about the possibility of them being born today. And usually that kind of opens up and breaks the ice a little bit as well with the voters, because what we're really looking for with Working Hoosiers Vote, obviously we want to engage folks in the electoral process, but we're really trying to identify new leaders and people that care about their communities. And this gives us an excuse to talk to people in our communities when in a world where people are having a harder time talking to each other with each passing day. So, but now to talk to you, I'm making sure Vanessa's on the screen. I feel like we lost her, but I think she's back.
Yeah.
So, okay. Cool.
I was gone. I was lost, but Matt found me in the ether. He pulled me out of the ether. Yes, no, thank you, Mel, for mentioning those really important things. You know, like the more that we can engage with the public, the better always, you know. You know, sometimes a lot of the themes that Chris was mentioning was just about trust, and we want people to trust us. And so, and we want y'all to trust Working Hoosiers Vote. So one of the ways that we're going to do that, I'm dropping the link now, you know, into the chat of how you can sign up for future voter registration dates. And one thing that you can trust is that we will be there with you. This isn't the last time you're going to see us, and not the last time that you're going to feel support.
Okay, so we're just gonna improvise a little bit because we lost Vanessa.
Oh, did you lose me?
Yeah, so Matt is gonna actually drop the link in the chat just in case we lose Vanessa's connection. And do you have that link? Okay, great. So what we need, so basically what Vanessa's saying is this ain't the last time you're gonna see us and feel supported by us. And I'm gonna let Vanessa take it away, and if she freezes again, then I'll take over again. Oh, is she frozen as we speak? Okay, nice. This is the benefit. These are the things that you learn when you move into a new house, right? Okay, cool. So basically what we have going on is when we say 100 days of action, that's what we're talking about, right? So there's 100 days from June 27th to the October, I think 5th. I'm just like bringing this out of my brain. The October 5th deadline. So there's a couple of things that we have for you that you can take action, like the lowest risk taking action. And then we've got some other things. So before we get off this call today, one of the things we're going to ask you to do is change your profile pic. We have a, what do you call that thing? We have a thing that goes over your profile pic that says, I'm taking action for voter registration to register voters. So you can change your profile to remind yourself every time you log into your Facebook that that's what you're doing. And then people are going to ask you, well, what does that mean? How can I get involved in taking action? As well. The next thing that we're going to do is we're actually going to print out, we're going to have printed yard signs for each one of our folks on our street team, right? That's you. You're our street team members. And we're going to print out yard signs that on one side it talks about the deadline to register, and it gives people a link, a QR code to that TurboVote that Chris talked about. And so if you're willing to change your profile pic and put a yard sign in your yard, can you give me like a plus sign in the chat? It doesn't matter if you're in West Lafayette or Lafayette. We say Greater Lafayette, so that's included. That's a great question. Great.
And also, if you're out in Battleground or Americus or Shadeland or, you know, Octagon. Right?
Greater Lafayette. I love that. I love that. Cool. So we're gonna give you a link to change your profile pic, and we're gonna do that before we get off the call, so everybody can just do it, and it'll be like a blast on the internet. We're gonna give you some yard signs to put in your yard, and on that October 5th, you can just flip the yard sign around because it has the date for election day on it. So these yard signs will last you all the way through to November. So, you know, if you've been decorating your yard with a Black Lives Matter sign these days, this is a good compliment to it. If you're still looking for that Black Lives Matter sign, I know Serge has got a form up on their Facebook today. So, okay, great. So if you're willing to go out and be part of our street team and sign up for some of our coordinated, what we call canvassing days, which could be at food finders, which could be at in neighborhoods and in parks, and we're going to give you all the supplies that you need. We're going to get you all of the what we call street training, refreshers, and debriefing. Go ahead and give me a plus sign in the chat. I'm loving that. See, this is how I get energy when I can't be in the same room as you guys, you know, keeping the chat moving. I love it. Okay, great. So we're gonna be, what we have is what you've probably already creeped on that Working Hoosiers Vote 100 Days of Action. And so what we need you to do is we need you to pull out your calendars now, and we need you to go ahead and grab that commitment card link that I think is going to show back up into the chat. Yes, Amy, we will definitely get to that. That's a great question. I'm enjoying that so much that I can't chat. I can't read it fast enough.
She's not over there.
Matt, are you gonna mute everybody for me? I can't figure out where that's coming from. Oh, I see it. No, I don't.
Yeah, I don't see it either. I'm looking for it.
Is it
I
Monica?
saw it. I found out who it was. Don't call her Monica.
Oh, sorry. My bad.
They were having too much fun to get that. Okay. So by now you've had time to pull out your calendar, and you can go ahead and put your first name, your email address, your cell phone number, and check all of the events that you feel like you can attend. So we have dates from as soon as this Friday, which is a Juneteenth celebration at Columbia Park. We also have our official kickoff. That's our pre-kickoff because Juneteenth happens before the 27th, but our official kickoff to the 100 days. And then when you see these Food Finders registrations here, or Food Finders opportunities, those are registering folks that are clients of Food Finders in their like drive-through situation. And then okay, great, yes. And then neighborhood VR, there's some community meet and greets. There's a voter dance party that we're planning for folks to get out the vote. We're gonna be registering folks at churches. So maybe you go to a church, you have relationships with people in a church, you might wanna check that box. We have a Register Your Coworkers Day that will provide you support to do. And then there's last chance voter registrations and car parades, right? One thing that I want to bring attention to is on July 29th, we're going to have a voter, basically a storytelling training. So we're going to do a training on how you can tell your story, right? Any organizer and activist needs to hone this skill over and over. And we're going to use the context of why we're voting, what issues matter to us as an opportunity. And that training will be online, where we will also collect your stories to use in our social media campaigns. That's a really great opportunity if you're, for everybody, but also if you are inside due to COVID-19, which I am one of those people that is spending more time inside due to some other health issues that I have. We also have the opportunity, there's a couple of other digital things on the thing, and we will, on the form, and we will answer any of those questions. If you have an Instagram account, or you use your Facebook story, and you would be excited about, yes, the Juneteenth is at Columbia Park. To Katie's question, do you have to be available for the entire time? Listen, I would say if you think you'd be able to be there for most of it, go ahead and click it. And then when you get your follow-up from folks saying, hey, this is where we're gonna be, you can communicate what your time restraints are. Yes, Tabitha, what we would say, this is a great question. What we're gonna do is, you'll probably see on the form that we have kind of a midpoint where we have, I think it's called like a catch-up voter registration training. So let's say you're out, you're doing things, you have friends that wanna join us and they wanna get like this training that you just got. That midpoint, that catch-up voter registration training would be a time where we would bring new people into our street team. And then we would also re-engage you all to say like, hey, has your schedule changed? Do you want to sign up for the other half? So if you only know, like, I can only do the first 50 days, here's my click, click, clicks, we'll give you another opportunity to click, click, click again when we get in the halfway point. We will do drop off we will coordinate with you to get your yard signs. Ideally, what we will do is when you arrive for your first, we'll definitely make some exceptions for folks like what Amy was bringing forward around the being in-house for COVID stuff. But ideally, when you come for your first registration, which obviously we didn't mention this, but I guess we should say like masks required, social distancing. We have like the way that we'll make sure that you have all of the things you need to make that the safest experience for both you and the folks that you're registering. That's one of the reasons why we're not going door to door when we normally do door to door canvassing. But we will get you your yard signs when you show up at your first action.
Yeah, could I add something about safety really quick? Because I kind of forgot that on the slide. Okay, one thing that we're really fortunate about is that a lot of the people who do the organizing here also work in food service. So these are folks who know how to deglove, reglove, right, and know how to not cross-contaminate things. So I'm really excited about what we're going to be doing to make sure that people are registering voters as safely as possible. It involves a lot of deglove, reglove. It involves a lot of hand sanitizer. We might have to clean some pens. You know, it's gonna be good though, and we're gonna make sure that people are doing it safely.
Nice. So go ahead and click that commitment form. There's a few other questions about a community read that we're looking at doing. And then if you know somebody else, like maybe you were clicking through and looking at everybody's faces and you thought, you know, my really good friend Sarah should be here, or Tom, who was just telling me today that they wanted to register voters and I just forgot to tell him to come, or my friend Tanya told me like, hey, send me the notes from the call. If you know someone that you want to invite to join the street team, we have a super secret makeup training that we didn't tell you about that is happening on the 20th. So does anybody know somebody that you might want to invite to that makeup training? And if you've got somebody in mind, maybe put a plus in the chat. I know we have at least 8 people that will be joining us on that makeup training. Nice. Great, Rachel. I love that. Secret training. Y'all don't hop on it though, because you've already gotten it. You know what I mean? So go ahead, and if there are folks that you thought of, make sure that you include that on your commitment card. So if you have their name and contact info, you can also let them know that we'll reach out to them. Rachel, and anybody else that puts somebody there, you might say like, hey, you might get a Zoom link from these folks about this training on the 20th. Does anybody have any questions about the commitment card? You can go ahead and unmute yourself if you'd like.
So these are days that we're going to commit to, like, coming in and registering people to vote.
Yeah, so some of them, yeah, most of the dates are that way. And then some of them, I think when they say like, it's an online training, or it's a catch-up training or things like that. So it's kind of, there are other things that we're doing to take action are teased in there, but the bulk of them are registration opportunities.
Okay. Because I'm still technically working from home, so like the ones midday don't really.
Yeah, so some of them midday might not work for you because of your schedule, but some folks have a little bit more flexibility during the day than they do in the evening. So we have multiple opportunities, and then there are plenty of Saturday opportunities included on the list, I believe.
So do you have a headquarters where we come and get stuff?
Yeah, so each opportunity you'll get connected. That's why we're getting your contact information, where we will have like a meeting location, and where most of them will meet outside somewhere so we can spread out. So we'll have a meeting location where you'll come, we'll kind of give you the lay of the land, like here's what we're doing today, here's our goals. You'll go out in pairs to accomplish it. And then you'll return so that you can turn back in the voter forms and things like that. So we will make sure that we get the voter forms to the, where we're going, to the election board. Thanks. Thanks, brain, for finding those words.
Hey, Mel.
Yeah.
I don't have access to the chat being on the phone, but I was a plus sign for the first two things. Can somebody message me that link?
Yes.
I sent you a Facebook friend request, but I'm friends with Chris Hagerty too.
Nice. Chris, will you send the commitment link to Chris June?
Yeah, absolutely.
Thanks.
I love it. Thanks, Chris. Both of you, both Chris's. Okay, if you've already filled out, if you've filled out your form, go ahead and give me a plus sign in the chat. If you just need a couple more seconds for me to stop talking to you so you can get it done, give me a minus sign in the chat.
Not letting me chat.
I was working on mine and I went over to my schedule and I lost all my work, so I'm starting from new. Sorry.
Oh man, I'm sorry. I hate that.
Sorry.
That happens to me all the time. Every doodle poll I ever fill out, I'm like having to. Okay, so if you've already filled out your form, I'm giving you a link to your Facebook profile frame that I mentioned earlier on the call. So what you can go ahead and do is you can change your profile. You're going to click that link and we're going to watch Matt do it live. I love that. And what you can do is, all you have to do is once you get there and you're logged into your Facebook, is you just have to click this blue button that you're about to see. We can't see it, Matt.
I need the link. I don't have the link.
Oh, I put it in the, oh shoot, I sent it to someone privately. Sorry, Laura got the goods before everybody else. Okay, so you can actually, you can indicate that you want it to switch back at a certain date as well if you wanted to. So you can pick, like, for example, the October 5th date, or you can do it for 2 months, or you can do it, etc. So all you have to do is click that link and then click that blue button in your profile pic. Your profile pic is changed to I'm taking action to register voters. Looking good, Matt.
Thanks. That was easy. Now everyone can do it.
Okay, cool. Nice. Yes, that was easy. I'm excited to do mine when I get off the call and I'm not having to minimize and maximize all of the things I have up for this call. Okay, well, we technically have 60 seconds left, so I'm going to take this time to tell you all how excited I am to get to know some of you more through this process of registering voters together. How pumped I am that we have folks in our community that care about those that are disenfranchised oftentimes by our electoral system, and how we can strategize together to find folks in our community, get them registered, but most importantly, build relationships with them so that we can get them engaged in the work, or maybe we can get engaged in what they're already engaged in that we don't know about yet, you know? So I always say that there's somebody out there scanning groceries at Payless that is like probably the best leader this town has ever seen, and we're just not, we just haven't met her yet, you know? So so what I would love to do, so I told you how excited I am. Chris says that he's max pumped. Matt says that he's hyped. I'd love to hear how you're feeling. Drop your feeling words. Where are we going to drop it? We're going to drop it in the chat. So tell me how you're feeling as we end our call here. I'm on the edge of my seat. Yes, Stacy. Love it. I love a thumbs up. I love it. Yes, Jerry. I love how proud you are of that too. You're like shimmying your way away from your screen. I love it. Yes. Yes. Nervous and optimistic. Yes. I feel that way all the time. Anticipation is both positive and nerve-wracking. Revived. Yes, Susie, thanks. I love that. Yeah, so I just want to remind you all that Black Lives Matter. If we're not saying it everywhere you go or every time you wake up and thinking how you, wherever it shows up, even in yourselves, then what are we really doing here anyway? And I just want to thank you all for being here. And we promise we'll check in on Vanessa. I think she's just had some internet issues lately, but I know we haven't lost her for good. And thanks for being a part of our street team. This is our first Working Hoosiers Vote street team. You all are going to be the ones that people talk about when they tell the story of how we turn things around in Lafayette as it relates to engaging everybody in our community in the political process. So just think about that. If you have any archivists in your life, this is going to be the story that they tell. Or historians actually tell the story. Archives help archive the things that historians talk about. There is an archivist on the line today, so I want to make sure I get that right. But thank you all so much. Again, Working Hoosiers Vote is Younger Women's Task Force of Greater Lafayette, showing up for racial justice, Greater Lafayette Indivisible, and Greater Lafayette Immigrant Allies. And please follow all of our socials. I know some of us have a few meetings coming up. If you want to, for some of you that just said you're new to town, you're trying to root into an organization, joining any of these organizations would be so worth your time, and we'd all love to have you. So I'm going to stay on the call. Matt's going to stay on too, since he's technically the host for a second, just in case people had some questions that they didn't want to share in front of everybody. We call this the Wild West portion. So we are officially done, but we'll stay on for a couple more minutes to answer any questions or calm any nerves that others have. So thanks everybody.